freeze.
During this time, I mean, Rick was also perfecting his stage show, right? And we kind of skipped over it, but how did he get the Stone City Band guys together? Were they old friends, or what was that situation?
Well, the only one that was a friend growing up, not well at a particular age, was Levi and Billy Nunn, those two. I mean, and Rick knew them basically when we moved from the projects out to Cold Spring. So, I mean, he met them when he was about 14, 15. They weren't what I would consider childhood friends. They were friends from 8th grade, 1 year at high school. And Rick only went to high school 2 years and was out of here, you know. So I think that the first group was a number of guys, white guys, Mike Caputi, Alan Sims, and a few other guys. I mean, just he got for the sound. And then he went around looking for people. It just happened, you know. Levi was one of the guys who that he knew from growing up, from about 14 to 15, and Levi was doing a lot of singing. So he got Levi, and Levi directed him to get other people, and that's how it went, basically.
And you knew Levi as well, Eddie?
Oh yeah, we went to grammar school together and high school for a year.
He seems a little, at least now, what I know of him, he seems a little irascible. He's kind of a character. Was he always that way?
Yeah, Levi was always a bully type. You know, he was always, you know, bigger than a lot of us when we were small, when we were young. You know, I mean, Levi was Levi as far as I was concerned. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time with him. I played baseball against him when I was young. We lived in the same neighborhood. That's about it. You know, then we were at Hutch Tech High School together for a year. But Rick wasn't there. Rick was at Bennett, I think, or Bennett East or Grover, wherever he went.
LeRoi, when did you first see Rick perform as the Rick James in the Stone City Band? I'm sure it was before you went to work with him, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would come out on the road and see him play, you know, and then, I mean, DC was the main market. When he came to DC, I saw him perform in DC. It's his first year, and you know, I went to some other venues where he played, Buffalo. So I mean, I saw him, but you know, I'm seeing the same person that I saw in Toronto, you know, and in LA perform. So before there was any band, so I'm seeing that same person.
Did it seem like he had turned it up a couple notches, or?
Yes, of course. I mean, he got better and better and better, more confident. Knew exactly what he wanted. He always knew what he wanted. So, I mean, it wasn't a surprise to me. It wasn't a surprise that when opportunity came, he was prepared. That was not a surprise.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the situation around when you came into managing with him. I know that, you know, I mentioned the Garden of Love came out in 80. It was a mellow thing. I guess he went off to the islands or something, and he did a more mellow record. And then I think Street Songs was that 81 or 82. 81 was Street Songs.
81, but the tour was 82. Yeah, it
So,
came out in 81.
but that obviously completely, I mean, lifted him to a whole new stratosphere.
Yeah.
Where did you come in during 81? What was the sequence of events?
Well, it was funny because Motown was trying to get me to come out from 78 on. But my life was such that I really wasn't that interested. I was married, and I preferred staying in Washington at that particular time. When that situation changed, not because of anything other than something from, my wife was taken to heaven, and as a result, I didn't want to stay in Washington anymore. So all the convincing that they'd done, they actually sent out, Eunice Griffin came from Motown, met with me and the mayor, and talked about me coming to work with him. Also, it came while my wife was around, and I was like, no, there's no way that I'm, leave my wife to go on the road with you. First is first. And then when that situation changed, that's when I reevaluated, and Motown sent Eunice out again, and we had a long, long talk. Flew me out to L.A., met with a lot of people. This is Motown, not Rick, because they wanted someone who who had some semblance of control. Nobody could control Rick, but I was the closest, so I went out. Rick and I had a long talk about me coming out, and I would learn a little bit about business, and then I would take over. And within 6 months, I think I took over. Didn't take long.
So what month of 81 was it, and when did the Street Songs come out? Was Street Songs out yet, or?
I don't think Street Songs was out, because I remember being in the studio with them in San Francisco and that. I left, I think, in either late May of 1981 or June of 81, and that's when I first started talking with Motown. And I went out to San Francisco with Rick and LA, and they were still recording. And then I made my decision, and then I went out to Los Angeles and started meeting with various lawyers and various management people and record company people. Did that whole routine, and then I went out with Rick. Then we started. We actually started pre-tour production, so I was there for that, and I started out working with merchandise to learn a little bit about what merchandise, which was doing absolutely nothing when I got out there. Took that, turned that around, and then as I was doing it, I was seeing what various other people were doing, and I took a little piece at a time, and then ultimately, within 6 months, I was running the show.
I have something here. You mentioned merchandise you might be familiar with.
That looks like a bootleg shirt to me.
I got it at the show.
Did you?
So
well,
81.
I remember can you look at the label inside? Those designs look like mine, but I don't recall that one exactly.
The label is.
And what year did you get that? 82?
81. It's the 81 tour at the Los Angeles Forum.
Okay. Is that Shirt Explosion? T-shirt Explosion?
The label's faded. I can't make it out. But no, I was at that show and was blown away by that show.
Okay. All right. Well, that one, Street Songs, I believe, was 82. I don't think it was 81. We might have had a small tour in 81, but
I might have seen him also at the Long Beach Arena.
Yep, we played the Long Beach Arena.
Yeah.
Did that.
Yeah.
That was one of our favorites. You know.
But the year before you came, though, I think it was the year before, maybe 2 years before, was the famous tour he did with Prince for a little while.
Yes.
Kind of become
79.
legendary over time. What was your impression of that, or what did you take away from that? Because people talk about that it was kind of a feud that came out of that and so forth. Has that been blown out of proportion, or what was your impression of that whole thing?
Well, I'm hearing very varying stories from what I've heard from Rick, particularly. Um, I know Rick kind of liked him, but then he didn't like the fact that he was stealing parts of his show, and he was a little bit disturbed about that, and I think that's why he released him, according to Rick. I mean, that's I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Well, there's been talk too that there was the Mary Jane Girls versus Vanity Six, and that Rick had the idea first or
Well,
whatever. And
that wasn't that then. I mean, the Mary Jane Girls, and that was 82, 83, and so was Vanity Six. So, I think Vanity may have come out ahead of us, but Rick did too much talking about coming out with the girl group, and they may have beat us to the punch on that. But I think the girls were much more successful than Vanity Six was.
no question about that. Yes.
I mean, you can push something out there, you can push those rockets out there, but they fail. You haven't done much. So, I mean, that's kind of like what happened with Mary Jane Girls and Vanity Six.
The Mary Jane Girls did great with their 2 albums.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so, what was your life like in a nutshell once you got really involved in the whole Rick James scene?
Well, it was a whirlwind because I had to do my job started at 9 in the morning and ended at 3 in the morning, and the things I had to do, the business things, were quite different than going on stage and performing. Although that was also part of making sure that went right and that everything on the business side happened. But um, it was a lot of tough work. So when we got a break, we took some good breaks. I took some good breaks. I had maybe 2 or 3 days to relax, and sometimes I'd go somewhere. But it was interesting because we stayed in all the top hotels and partied in all the places that people talk about, Studio 54 and the Cheetah and um, Carlos and Charlie's in L.A., Tramps, all of that. I mean, it was exciting, to do a lot of different things that other people just couldn't do because basically couldn't get in. It was it was closed to anybody but celebrities. So, but the work was very hard, and most people don't know that. They don't know what it is to go into the box office and have to deal with that scenario, and how you in pre-tour, what is done in pre-tour, and all the dynamics of keeping 70 wild people in line, and that's what I had to do. 70 crazy individuals, not just one, Rick James, 70 of them. I don't think there was one stable out the whole group. So, I mean, it was a learning experience. It was a learning experience.
Did you ever think, good Lord, what did I get myself into?
I didn't even have time to think, so I didn't think about anything. I was too busy going from putting one fire out to the next. We were basically sued almost in every city, and run out of half of them. Police were waiting on us in every city because Rick would smoke weed on stage, and so I had to deal with that complication. And usually run out of town, that sort of thing, and get paid by promoters, and promoters are not the easiest people to deal with. They don't even care if it's sold out. They're going to still try to beat you. So, you had to be on your toes for that. And you had to be on your toes for bootleggers. And at the same time, I'm running the girls and trying to do promotion when we hit those towns for future things. So it wasn't an easy job. But after a while, it became pretty standard. And I understood what I had to do. And we did it in every venue. And as a result, some of the things that we did, like for instance with merchandise, I made sure that if I didn't sell all my merchandise, I'd make sure all the boys clubs and that would get T-shirts, and those were marketing for the next show. So I would leave 1,000 shirts in almost every market, and those were what we call our lost leaders. But you still have one, and I walked in with one recently in Los Angeles. He paid $300 for it on Amazon, eBay or one of those. And I was like, I wish I could have sold them for $300 a piece back then.
Yeah.
But when you do something quality, it lasts. So, and I think that most of what we did was quality.
Did the fact that you were Rick's brother help or hinder when you needed to get things in order? I mean, because I would think obviously have the relationship, but then maybe sometimes would he sort of like say, LeRoi,
Yeah, I mean, it a little bit of both. But I like to remind people that, there's a Georgetown side of me. And the other side of me was from projects. So the question is, which one did you want to deal with? You want to deal with the project? You don't really want to deal with the project side of me. You want to deal with the Georgetown? You don't want to deal with that side either. So for the most part, once you understood who I was, I had no problem. That was with band members, with drug dealers, with the rest of them. Because with the band members, for instance, I made them an offer that they couldn't refuse.
Well, Street Songs, what a masterpiece that was Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby and Get a Life and Fire and Desire, and just from beginning to end, just such a great work. I think it commercially did the best, but I think also it was, to me, from end to end, his most consistently great record. I don't know how you feel about that, but did you kind of have a sense of that at the time, even before it blew up, that this thing was really loaded?
Oh yes. When I heard that album, I said, really, we really have something, and we prepared our tour like that for having a monster album. There were some concerns about Street Songs. I mean, Rick didn't really want Street Songs on the album because he thought it was too techno, and I was like, you got to have that song on the album. And it wasn't the single that was released. One of the DJs, I think in California somewhere, picked it up and started playing it. So Street Songs was strong, and the rest of them, Street Songs was a monster. But everything else was carrying the album. I think it stayed, we stayed number one, at least on the R&B charts, for 52 straight weeks. So, I mean, we did well. But I mean, I always felt as though that was his strongest album. But it was a little different than the first three. The first three were more streety, in my view. They were more funky and more daring and different, a lot different than everything else that was out there. And that Street Songs was different also, but it was more commercial, more polished.
And when I saw his show, I mean, it was 2 hours of kick ass,
Oh yeah.
And he was a great charismatic force on stage.
Oh yeah, and that's a lot of that he got from Canada, from performing with the rockers. A lot of that is rock that he was doing. A lot of that, his show with the guitar players and the rest. A lot of that had to do with some of the shows we used to see back in the early '60s that used to come through this place called the Pine Grill, and they had these big shows with these big bands, a lot of people you really never even heard of. But they would have like 3 and 4 horn players and 15, 20 people on stage. And I think that had a lot of influence on Rick. To get that big sound, you needed certain people out there, and you needed some good players. You needed a good horn player, good horn section, and good guitars. He had 2 guitar players, 2 keyboard players, 3 background singers, powerful drummer. I mean, he had a big band. We had a lot of people on stage and a lot of mouths to feed. That required a lot of support. So we had a lot of technical people with us. We tried to have good staging and the rest.
How much did Rick keep his eye on the charts and for himself, and also those of other players and performers maybe he saw as rivals or
Always, he always kept his eyes on the charts, and always he wanted to. He walked around Motown, and they had a room where the guys would keep the charts and see where everybody was. And Rick knew what he needed to have done. He knew that, okay, you need to put more marketing, more promotion into a certain area. I mean, I mentioned that earlier, that in this particular city, you need to, we either Prince or the Gap Band may be doing a little bit stronger than us there. You need to get out there and market. I mean, we're going to do our part, because when we hit the tour, that's the greatest marketing that there is. And nobody for the years that we were out there could touch us in that. But when he looked at the charts and he would see somebody, the main group that he was interested in back in those days was the Gap Band. Mm-hmm. Only later was Prince. Prince came along maybe 83, 84, started hitting. Michael started doing the same. I mean, but we all partied together. We were all at Carlos and Charlie's together, El Privado. We were all at Studio 54 together. So the charts were very important. So Rick paid a lot of attention. He wanted to see the charts. So we got the charts and we looked at it, and we looked at the radio play, the sales. And we looked at how much Motown was putting into it. See, and some of those early years, Rick was big because of the record, and they didn't have to put that money in there. And the other companies are putting that money out there to keep that record out there and to push it. So, and Rick knew that. So, and we had that built into our contract after '82, that you had to. You had to put this kind of money into these things. You had to do video and the rest. So, yes, he did look at the charts. He's very familiar with the charts. I mean, I learned a lot about the charts from dealing with Rick and going from office to office in Motown and finding out who was doing their job and who wasn't.
Of course, it was very different back then. With the charts, there were several different charts, and sales were a whole different ballgame, and charting from the way it is today.
Oh, yeah.
But I sensed that Rick was very competitive.
Right. Oh, yeah. He knew what it took to stay where he was. And he knew that the record companies had to put money into this. I mean, you don't just take money out. You have to put money in to keep this thing rolling. That meant that and the one stops and that you had to buy stand-ups, and you had to put a number of records in these shops. I mean, all that goes into it. And you look at all of that. You say how many records are out in Detroit, how many records are in Chicago, how many records are in New York, and how many records are international. I mean, we did the whole thing. And we'd look at every region and see what we were doing. A lot of that had also, you look at that to determine where and what you were going to do on tour. What were your sales like here? What were your sales like there? What were you charting? And what could we do if we either went in and did promotion or we played there? So he was very familiar with all of that and paid a lot of attention to it.
And when Street Songs made him more of an international star too, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is, Rick didn't want to do international touring. He always felt that the money was in the United States, which was true. The short-term money is in the United States. The long-term money is overseas because they seem they stick with you for longer in the European markets and in the foreign markets.
So when he was, skyrocketed to success and fame, how did he still find time with all the partying I assume he was doing to still be so productive? I mean, because in the early 80s, I think he was really burning the candle at both ends, but he was still so productive.
Well, I mean, he did what he had to do, and he knew what he had to do. I think Rick overworked himself with all the acts. I mean, he had too many acts, and he was the only one that was really doing the production. So he had the Do-Rags, and he had the Mary Jane Girls, and he did a little work with Process. I mean, not with Process, Val Young, but then he's doing work with the Temptations, and he's doing work with Donny Osmond. He's doing work with Eddie Murphy. He's doing something with Smokey Robinson. He's doing that. I mean, that was too much. It's just too much. And I used to tell him, I said, keep that music for yourself. Keep it all yourself. Now that we got the girls going a little bit, let's get somebody else, some other producers in, but he just never would do it.
Why do you think he wanted to spread himself out that much?
Well, he had some things that were firmly in his mind that he wanted to do. He wanted a boys group, he wanted a girls group, and he wanted to create a black Marilyn Monroe. Those were things that were in his mind. But at the same time, when he would start on something, he might say that, oh, boy, this might work with the Temps. Or if somebody came around, there was always somebody coming around and say, do a song for me. And Rick was a good-hearted guy, so you get him around and, okay, I'll do a song. I'll do that for them. That song turns out to be a hit. That song should have been on Rick's album, not on their album.
Well, I had, a while back, a couple of years now, I had the Hughes brothers on this show. And they talked about how Rick was so gifted, that songs would just kind of like come into his head. Can you speak to that at all?
It's very true. I mean, Rick, I watched Rick write a song telling someone that how easy it was to write a song. And just hum this section. And then he would play it on the keyboard. And then he'd ask one of the band members. He did it all the time on the road. All the time on the road. I got this idea. I'll play this part. Now, bass player play this part. Now, guitar player play this part. And the song was coming, and he would hum something, and then change that humming into words. For him, if you're gifted, you can do it. For other people, I mean, it's hard to write a hit. You have a lot of one-hit people. You have a lot of two-hit people. You have a lot of three-hit people. But they only have one hit in life, two hits in life, three hits in life. Rick has a lot of hits. So you're a hit maker. So you have that formula, but you also, not only do you have to have the formula, but you have to have that connection with the people, because the people really determine whether your song is going to be a hit. You have to have a connection, a feeling of what these people out here are looking for. And that's what Rick had. Rick had that connection, that feel, where he could put down something and put a feel. And it wasn't like he wasn't listening to other people's stuff, because he did. And it wasn't like he was stealing anybody, but you can listen and get a feel, and then you can do your own thing. And I think it inspires you to do that. It inspires you to, because you're going to hear it anyway, You're going to hear Michael, you're going to hear Prince and all the rest. You're not going to copy them because it'd be obvious. I'm Rick James. I have my own thing. But when you hear somebody else, it says, okay, I'm going to go in the studio, I'm going to write something. I'm going to do something.
Well, no question. I mean, he had a completely identifiable sound between the music and especially his voice and singing. not like the Barquets say copying sounds. But you mentioned the Temptations, and Throwing Down was the follow up to Street Songs, and also did almost as well, but not quite. And Standing on the Top, another one of my very favorite Rick James tracks, especially the extended version that was not on the album, unfortunately. I think it went on the Temptations album.
Right.
Um, were you able to meet those guys, and were you part of that? Did you go to the
I
session,
was
or
there. I was at the sessions. Yes.
what was that
Yes.
like?
Well, by that time, the Temptations were history, and Rick's idea was to bring them back. And it was interesting to hear the Temptations, because I grew up on the Temptations. We are, and to have them come back and to reunite. They were going to reunite, but I think this song really became a million seller for them, Stand on the Top. So, and the video and the rest. But it was interesting because Berry Gordy came into the studio, and Smokey and the rest, they all came in, and they were all excited for the Temps and Rick. And that's something that, that firmly placed Rick in the Motown family. To do something with Smokey, to do something with the Temps, that. It's very difficult. Most people don't think of Rick as being part of the Motown family. I mean, they think of Rick and they just think Rick, but they don't know what company he was with. But Motown is a very close-knit family of artists who were there pre-Rick. Rick is the artist that kept Motown alive for that period from '78 through '85, just before they sold it to, I guess, BMI or Universal.
Did Motown, in your opinion, pressure Rick to try to replicate the Street Songs' success, or was he pressing himself to do that, even with like?
They had no control over Rick. They always wanted the best that Rick could do, but sometimes Rick's view was, I gave you all these hits, y'all can wait, try to write something else. I think with Garden of Love, he just gave him what he wanted to. He knew that he should be coming with the funk, but he gave him the Garden of Love, these ballads and that, and that was Rick. Rick said, I want you to want me more. So he would give him something. I'm not going to give you hit after hit after hit just because you want it. I'm going to give you what I feel like giving you as an artist. And if I want to veer away from something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give you what I feel like giving you.
And he had, I don't know, it must be at least a dozen, if not more, under his name, major, R&B hits. A couple have crossed over, You and I and Super Freak. Did he feel like he thought more should have crossed over? Did he care about that crossover? Or was
that's why he was in the business. Rick was really in the business. Rick wanted to be a crossover artist. It didn't happen for him with the Minor Birds and that. So his idea was, maybe I'll cross over with Motown with a crossover R&B type feel. Sly had done it. I guess Sly and Jimi Hendrix were the only two really had done it.
Stevie Wonder?
Well, Stevie, although he was crossing over, Stevie was still Motown. You can look at Motown and put them in a whole different category. Motown and early Michael Jackson. And when Michael got with CBS, it's complete crossover. He crossed over so far that the other people who, they had to try to catch up with him. Michael was just in a whole another world. But yeah, he did want to cross over more, but not to compromise his sound to cross over. Mm-hmm. And he did. We did. A lot of our concerts were 50-50. Mm-hmm. And in some venues it was 80% crossover I mean, we played in a lot of places, Saginaw and Albuquerque, and a lot of mid areas, Tacoma and San Bernardino, and that were all totally crossover. The whole California market was kept crossover. You know,
I think in live, definitely he crossed over big time with all of
yeah.
it, but radio, though, didn't jump on some of the other tracks as much as,
Well, I mean, but Rick opened the doors for the crossover audience that wasn't there before. I mean, to have one or two acts crossover, that's nothing. It's nothing. Rick was one of the ones who helped to open the doors for a lot of black acts, particularly with what he did with MTV. If Rick, what he did for MTV was to force them to break those barriers that they had by playing nothing but rock acts and maybe one or two blacks, to open it up to other acts. And it actually was to their benefit, because they profited by that, but we never did. They began playing rappers, they become playing a lot of the other R&B acts, and really the whole entertainment world start opening up, because everybody don't want to just hear just rock and roll. They want to hear all kinds of music. And I guess you remember when Rick went on Nightline with MTV and contested the whole video thing, because there was no outlet for black acts if MTV wasn't going to play the videos.
Yeah, I don't think BET had quite started doing that yet.
BET wasn't around really to do anything. So it was MTV. And as a result of MTV, that fight, MTV formed VH1, which was a great success. And because of VH1 success, then MTV changed their format. But as a result of all of that, we got no benefit out of that. Prince and Michael Jackson and some of the other acts got all the benefit. We never got any benefit. I don't think Rick was ever played on MTV.
Yeah. They pissed me off to no end back then. I mean, I thought it was flat out racist when they first started, and they had that policy. But
Rick called it out. Called it out as racist. Now you explain to me why. The reason why you are what you are, because you want to play just rock and roll. You want to play rock groups. That's it.
I think they were hiding behind that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I want to just have Methodist preachers. That's all in my group. So that means you don't want to deal with anybody else. That doesn't fly. It didn't fly then. It doesn't fly now.
Hit me, yeah. Y'all better take some insurance out on your booty tonight, because we are not responsible. Ain't it fucking that?